Table by the window, please. Same as every Wednesday.
Not anymore. Get up, you filthy wreck!
Sir, I just want my usual breakfast.
Thing. Fake leg, rotten jacket stinking up my dining room. You're not a customer. You're garbage with a tray.
I earned this jacket, sir.
Nothing. Beggars steal those from thrift stores.
He grabbed the veteran's coffee and poured it across his lap. Steam rose.
Breakfast. Now crawl out before I have you dragged by that plastic leg.
Yes, sir. I'll go.
The whole diner watched in silence. Phones came up. Nobody helped. Nobody knew that in 11 minutes, a 4-star general would walk through that door and ask for him by name. Have you ever been thrown away by someone who had no idea who you really are?
To understand what happened in that diner, you need to rewind 3 hours. Back to a small brick house on Cedar Lane in Falls Creek, Virginia. The alarm rang at 5. Owen Abbott was already awake. 30 years in the Army will do that to a man. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached for the prosthetic leaning against the nightstand. Carbon fiber, cold to the touch. He fitted it to what remained of his left leg, rolled the sleeve, locked the pin. The click echoed in the quiet room. Then he stood, steady as a flagpole, and made the bed with corners sharp enough to cut paper. He polished his shoes at the kitchen table while coffee brewed. 1 spoon of grounds, never 2. Outside the window, the sky over Falls Creek turned from charcoal to pale orange. He ironed a shirt that was already ironed. Then he took the old army jacket from its hook by the door. The fabric had faded from forest green to something softer, like moss after rain. 3 tours stitched into its seams. He put it on the way other men put on Sunday suits. 9 blocks separated Cedar Lane from the Copper Skillet. Owen walked them every Wednesday, rain or shine. Step, click, step, click. Past the barber shop, past the hardware store, past kids waiting for the school bus who waved at him like clockwork. The walk took him 40 minutes. A taxi would take 5. But Mason Tate never got the chance to walk anywhere again, so Owen walked for both of them. The Copper Skillet had stood on the corner of Main and 3rd for 40 years. Gus Pemberton built it with his own hands, hung the copper pans himself, and burned the first pancake on purpose for luck. The booths were cracked vinyl, the coffee was strong, and the griddle hissed like a living thing from 6 in the morning until close. The smell of bacon and maple reached the sidewalk before the door even opened, but the sign out front had changed last month. Under the old copper letters hung a new plastic banner, a Whitmore hospitality property. Gus had signed the papers in October with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. His wife Eleanor needed a 3rd surgery, and insurance covered less each year. The chain promised to keep the staff, keep the menu, keep the soul. Promises are cheap when they're printed on a contract nobody reads twice. Brenda Cole had managed the place for 11 years. She knew every regular by order. Scrambled soft for the pastor, rye toast from the twins from the firehouse, and for the quiet man at the window table, 2 coffees, both black, and the veteran's special with eggs over medium. She never asked why the 2nd cup sat untouched across the table. She just kept it filled and warm. Some questions you answer by not asking them. Tessa Reed worked the morning shift to pay for community college. 19, quick with a tray, quicker with a smile. The first week on the job, she'd tried to clear the untouched cup away. Owen had stopped her, gentle as a librarian. "That cup belongs to Sergeant Mason Tate," he told her. "He takes his coffee black, and he is always on time." Tessa had looked at the empty bench across from him and understood. She never touched the cup again. Every Wednesday at 7 sharp, the bell over the door chimed and Owen stepped in. Wednesday was the day of the ambush in the Korengal Valley, 15 years ago. The day 11 men came home because of him, and one man didn't. The window table faced east toward the morning sun. Mason had loved sunrises, so that was the table, and that was the ritual, and for 15 years, nothing had interrupted it. That morning, a notice hung crooked on the kitchen door. Corporate Brand Inspection, Wednesday, 8 a.m. Executive Leadership attending. Brenda read it twice and felt her stomach tighten around her coffee. Tessa shrugged. How bad could it be? At 7, the bell chimed. Owen Abbott stepped inside and shook the drizzle off his jacket. He smiled at the window table like an old friend. The rain outside picked up. Wind rattled the new plastic banner over the door. 1 hour later, Calvin Whitmore's black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The Mercedes door opened before the engine stopped ticking. Calvin Whitmore stepped out like a man inspecting conquered territory. Silver hair sculpted into place, a charcoal suit that cost more than the diner's monthly payroll. He paused on the sidewalk, looked up at the copper letters, and frowned the way other men spit. It was 8 o'clock exactly. He was the kind of man who made punctuality feel like a threat. 2 assistants trailed behind him in matching gray suits. The taller one, Colin Pierce, carried a tablet and a checklist. The shorter one carried Whitmore's coffee, brought from somewhere else entirely. That detail alone told you everything. The man had come to judge a diner without any intention of tasting it. The bell over the door chimed. Conversations dipped. Whitmore stood in the entrance and let the silence stretch. He enjoyed it the way some men enjoy applause. "Smell that?" he said to Pierce. "Grease. 40 years of grease. You can't rebrand a smell." Brenda came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, wearing the smile she saved for health inspectors. "Mr. Whitmore, welcome to the Copper Skillet. Can I get you gentlemen some breakfast?" "You can get me answers." He walked past her outstretched hand. "Why are these pans on the wall? It looks like a yard sale." Gus hung those when he opened the place. "The customers love them. It's kind of our... They come down this week." He dragged one finger along a booth seam and inspected it like evidence. Cracked vinyl, sticky menus, linoleum older than my first wife. This entire location is a liability with syrup on it. Pierce typed every word into the tablet. The shorter assistant nodded at things. Around the room, regulars stared into their plates. The pastor stirred his eggs without eating them. The Firehouse twins exchanged a look and said nothing. The griddle hissed on, indifferent. Whitmore toured the room slowly, narrating its failures. The pie case was a bacteria museum. The coffee was diesel for poor people. The hand-painted specials board was something a child made in detention. Brenda followed him, with her smile dying, one comment at a time, doing the math on her mortgage every time he said the word liability. Then he saw the window table. He stopped in the middle of the floor. His eyes narrowed at the figure sitting in the morning light. An old black man in a faded military jacket, gray at the temples, a metal leg visible below the hem of his trousers. 2 cups of coffee on the table, one of them untouched. "What?" Whitmore said slowly. "Is that?" Brenda followed his gaze, and her stomach dropped. "That's Owen. He's been coming every Wednesday for 15 years. He's no trouble at all. He just... I'm rebranding this location as an upscale family destination." His voice carried across the room, and he wanted it to. "And the first thing my customers will see through the front window is a vagrant in a costume? Sir, he's a veteran. He's a paying customer. He's a prop from a charity commercial." Whitmore snapped his fingers at her, twice, the way you call a dog. "Clear that table. Now." Brenda didn't move. 11 years she had run this floor. She had survived rushes, walkouts, a kitchen fire, and one armed robbery. Her hands were shaking anyway. "Mr. Whitmore, please. He'll be done in 20 minutes. He's never once." "Are you negotiating with me?" He tilted his head, almost amused. "There are 900 people in this state who can manage a diner. You're employed by a coincidence. Clear the table or clean out your locker." Tessa stood frozen by the coffee station, a pot cooling in her hand. From the kitchen window, the cook watched through the pass, spatula motionless in the air. Outside, the drizzle thickened against the glass. The morning sun Mason had loved was gone behind the clouds, as if it refused to watch. Whitmore didn't wait. He crossed the floor himself, heels clicking on the linoleum, and stopped at the window table. He stood over it the way storm clouds stand over picnics.
Owen looked up from his eggs. "Mornin'," he said, pleasant as the sunrise behind him. "You done here? We're upgrading our clientele." "I've got about half a plate left, sir. Then the table's all yours." "You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation." Whitmore's eyes traveled down the jacket, slow and deliberate, cataloging every faded patch. "Where did you get the costume? Goodwill? Or do you people pass them around?"
The words, "you people," landed on the room like a dropped tray. Somebody's fork stopped halfway. At a corner booth, a phone rose quietly above the seat back, camera lens steady. By the register, Tessa slid her own phone from her apron, propped it against the napkin holder, and pressed record. Her heart hammered. Her hand did not. "I was issued it," Owen said. "Fort Benning, 1989.
"Sure you were." Whitmore noticed the second cup. He frowned at it, did the arithmetic, and glanced at the empty bench. "Who's the second coffee for? Your imaginary friend?" "It's for Sergeant Mason Tate." Owen's voice stayed level, almost gentle. "We had breakfast every Wednesday before deployment. He didn't make it home, so on Wednesdays, I buy his coffee. 15 years now." For 1 second, the room held its breath. Surely even this man would step back from that. Whitmore laughed.
It was a short, clean laugh, like a cough. "That is the saddest scam I have ever heard. You're paying for a ghost's coffee, so the staff lets you squat by my window." He picked up Mason's cup, held it out over the floor at arm's length, and tipped it. Black coffee poured onto the linoleum, splashing the table leg and the toe of Owen's polished shoe. He set the cup back on its saucer, upside down. Policy: 1 customer, 1 cup. The dead don't order here. Gasps moved through the room. Tessa's hand went over her mouth. The coffee pot in her other hand trembled hard enough to ripple. Owen looked at the puddle spreading slow across the floor. 15 years of Wednesdays soaking into 40-year-old linoleum. His jaw worked once. His hand flattened on the tabletop. Then, with an effort that cost more than anyone in that room would ever know, he folded the anger up and put it away, the way the army had taught him.
"Sir," he said quietly,
"That cup wasn't hurting your business." "Everything about you hurts my business." Whitmore leaned down, both fists on the table, close enough that Owen could smell cologne over coffee. "Get up, you filthy wreck." "Sir, I just want to finish my breakfast." "Look at this thing." He straightened, presenting it to the room now, an executive giving a tour. "Fake leg, rotten jacket, stinking up my dining room. You're not a customer. You're garbage with a tray." "I earned this jacket, sir." "You earned nothing. Beggars steal those from thrift stores." And then he did the thing the whole town would watch on their phones by midnight. He grabbed Owen's own cup, the one he had paid for, and poured it across the old man's lap. Steam rose off the denim. The room made a sound like a wound opening. Somewhere, a chair scraped. A little girl asked her mother why the man did that, and the mother had no answer to give her. Owen did not flinch. He did not cry out. He sat in the scald of it, with his back straight and his eyes forward, somewhere far away where this was only weather. "There's your breakfast," Whitmore said. "Now crawl out before I have you dragged by that plastic leg." Around the room, silence, with phones in it. 3 cameras now, maybe 4. The pastor half rose, then sat back down. The Firehouse twins found something fascinating in their toast. Brenda stood with her fist pressed against her mouth. Nobody stood up. Nobody ever stands up until it is too late. Later, every one of them would swear they almost did. Almost is a word cowards keep in their pockets. Owen set his napkin on the table and squared it with the edge, out of habit. He pulled out his wallet and laid down 2 bills. Enough for the meal, both coffees, and the tip he never skipped. "Yes, sir," he said. "I'll go." But getting out of a booth with a prosthetic leg takes a moment, and Calvin Whitmore had already decided not to give him one. He turned toward the parking lot, where his driver doubled as security, and raised 2 fingers. "Security! Drag this filthy panhandler out!" He looked back at Owen one last time, and raised his voice so the whole room could hear the new house rules. "And you? Listen close. We don't serve your kind of broken here. Get out." 2 men in dark jackets came through the door. They moved through the tables without hurry. Big men, bored eyes, paid by the hour. What happened in the next 90 seconds would be argued about in every house in Falls Creek by sundown. And it would bring 3 black SUVs across 200 miles of Virginia highway, straight to that window. The 2 men reached the booth and stood on either side of it like bookends. Owen raised a hand, calm, reasonable. "Gentlemen, I'm going. I just need a second." The leg comes out sideways. They did not give him a second. The bigger one grabbed him under the arm and hauled. The prosthetic, still angled beneath the table, caught the steel base and twisted hard against the socket. Owen felt the pin shear loose. He went down between the tables with a crash of silverware, one hand catching a chair, the other catching nothing at all. The sound a body makes hitting a diner floor is not a movie sound. It is flat and heavy and wrong. A water glass tipped and rolled to the edge of a table and stopped there, trembling. Somebody screamed, a little scream. The little girl started to cry. The Firehouse twins were halfway out of their seats before their eyes met, and some silent math about pensions and mortgages sat them back down. A trucker at the counter muttered something into his mug that would have gotten him banned too, if anyone had heard it. Owen lay there a moment, cheek inches from the linoleum he had walked across for 15 years. His prosthetic foot pointed the wrong way. He did not curse. He did not shout. He breathed, the way you breathe when pain is an old roommate, and began the slow arithmetic of getting up. Whitmore stepped around the spilled coffee so it wouldn't touch his shoes. "Careful with the furniture," he told the security men. "The furniture's worth something." Then it happened. As Owen pushed himself to one elbow, something slid from his jacket pocket and skittered across the floor. Small, heavy, brass. A regimental crest, worn smooth at the edges by 30 years of thumbs. It came to rest in the open doorway, glinting in the gray light. Owen's whole body changed. The calm cracked. "Please," he said, and it was the first time that morning his voice had moved. "That's mine. Please, don't." Whitmore looked down at the badge. Then he looked at Owen on the floor, reaching for it, and with the toe of one polished Oxford, he kicked it out the door and onto the wet sidewalk. Costume props belong in the trash. The badge bounced once, skipped through a puddle, and lay still in the rain. The pastor stood up. 60 years old, napkin still tucked in his collar, voice shaking. "Sir, that man is a veteran. In this town, we don't." "Then he can pray somewhere else. And so can you." Whitmore didn't even turn around. "Sit down or settle up." The pastor sat down. He would hate himself for it every Sunday after. Behind the register, Brenda had stopped pretending to work. She turned her back to the room, pulled out her phone, and dialed with hands that wouldn't hold still. 3 rings. Then a rough old voice, half awake. "Gus," she whispered, "get down here. Now. Before they do something we can't undo. They already did. Just come." Tessa's phone kept recording from the napkin holder. 8 minutes of footage now. Her thumb hovered, then moved on its own. Before she could think better of it, she opened the app her whole generation lived inside and pressed share. The clip left her hands and entered the world, the way lit matches do. The security men got Owen upright. They walked him to the door with his arms pinned, his prosthetic dragging a half-beat behind, and released him onto the sidewalk like a delivery nobody ordered. The bell over the door chimed, cheerful and obscene. Through the glass, the whole diner watched him sway, find his balance, and stand. The drizzle had become rain. Owen looked down at the badge in the puddle. Getting down to it was a procedure. He braced one hand on his good knee, lowered himself in stages, the carbon fiber leg stiff and unforgiving, until one knee rested on the wet concrete. He picked the crest out of the water and wiped it with his thumb, slow, deliberate, the way you wipe a child's face. Then he checked the prosthetic, found the sheared pin, and reset the foot by hand with a click that nobody on the dry side of the glass could hear. Brass and rainwater. Falls Creek behind it, blurred, and for a moment, he was somewhere else. Rain on rocks, the smell of cordite and copper, a weight across his shoulders, heavier than any weight before or since, and a young man's voice in his ear saying, stay with me, please." 11 men went home because of what happened in that rain. The 12th came home, folded in a flag. Owen blinked, and it was Virginia again. Nobody came out to help him stand. He did it alone, in stages, in the rain, in front of a window full of people who had watched him eat breakfast for 15 years. Inside, the show continued. Whitmore clapped his hands once, a man resetting a room. "All right, folks, excitement's over. Enjoy your meals." He turned to Tessa, pointed at the cooling brown puddle that had been Mason Tate's last cup. "You, mop that mess before it stains." Tessa came out from behind the counter with the mop because she was 19 and terrified, and her tuition was due. She knelt where the coffee had spread and pushed the gray strings through 15 years of Wednesdays. Tears dropped straight off her chin into the bucket. She kept her face turned away so the manager wouldn't see, not knowing her phone was still on the counter, still recording, catching everything. Whitmore dictated to Pierce as he walked the room. "New location policy, effective today. Dress code, enforced. No loitering, no solicitation, and add a band list." He nodded toward the window where Owen stood in the rain. "Him first. Get a photo for the file." He paused beside Brenda on his way past, lowered his voice to something almost intimate. "And your attitude this morning goes in my report. Smile more. You're cheaper to replace than the napkins." Pierce hesitated for the length of one heartbeat, which was the bravest thing anyone in a gray suit did all morning. Then he raised his tablet and photographed a decorated combat veteran, through the glass of a diner that used to save his table. A printed sign went up on the door while the laminator was still warm. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Across the street, Owen lowered himself onto the bus bench. He sat the way he ate, the way he lived. Back straight, eyes forward, jacket soaked through and steaming faintly. Rain found the seam of his collar and crawled down his spine. He let it. Cold was honest, at least. Cold never pretended to be anything else. The school bus rolled past, and the kids, who waved at him every Wednesday, waved at him now, too young to know what they were waving at. He raised one hand and waved back, and managed a smile for them. And that smile was the worst thing the rain saw all day. At the window table, his eggs went cold next to 2 bills nobody had collected. The upside-down cup sat on its saucer like a small, white tombstone. Whitmore stood at the glass with his imported coffee and watched the old man on the bench. He sipped. See that, Pierce? Decisive management. One eyesore gone. Property value up. He checked his watch. Bored already. Brand protected. Problem solved. He had 11 minutes left to believe that. It came first as a feeling in the floor. A low diesel trimmer that climbed up through the linoleum and into the water glasses, which began, very quietly, to ring. Then sound, deep and stacked. More than one engine, the kind of engines that move things that matter. Conversations died mid-word. The cook came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands. 3 black SUVs rounded the corner of Main and 3rd in tight formation and pulled up in front of the copper skillet, bumper to bumper, engines drumming the windows. Government plates. And on the front fender of the lead vehicle, small and red and impossible, a metal flag plate carrying 4 silver stars. Traffic stopped in both directions. A man, walking his dog, froze mid-step on the far corner, phone already out. Inside the diner, nobody chewed, nobody swallowed, nobody breathed. Doors opened in unison, like a drill. Men and women in army service uniform stepped out into the rain, squared away, unhurried, and the rain suddenly looked like it was falling on purpose. Whitmore straightened his tie in the window reflection and smiled. "Pierce," he murmured. "Looks like the upgraded clientele found us already." He genuinely believed they had come for him. The whole diner held its breath, phones rising like periscopes, as a colonel in a rain-darkened beret moved to the lead vehicle and opened the rear door with white-gloved precision, holding it against the wind. He was about to find out exactly who the broken man on the bus bench really was. The man who stepped out of that SUV did not hurry, because men like him never had to. Tall, silver at the temples, a chest of ribbons in rows like a city skyline. And on each shoulder of his rain-darkened uniform, 4 silver stars caught the gray light and gave it back. General Raymond Holloway, Chief of Staff of the United States Army. 1,100,000 soldiers answered, eventually, to the man now standing on the sidewalk of a 40-year-old diner in Falls Creek, Virginia. The bell over the door chimed. It sounded different this time. Everything did. He came in with a colonel and 2 aides, removed his cap, and tucked it under his arm. Rainwater dripped from it onto the linoleum next to the mop bucket. The silence in that room had texture. You could have hung the copper pans on it. Whitmore was already moving, gliding between tables with his hand extended and his salesman voice warming up. "General, welcome, welcome. Calvin Whitmore, Whitmore Hospitality Group. This is one of our properties. What an absolute honor. Whatever you and your people need, it's on the house, of course." The general looked at the offered hand the way a man looks at weather. He did not take it. His eyes were already moving past Whitmore, sweeping the room, checking each booth with the efficiency of a man who had read rooms where reading them wrong cost lives. "I'm looking for someone," he said. His voice was low gravel, built for command posts. "Sergeant First Class Owen Abbott. He eats breakfast here every Wednesday. Window table." He nodded toward it. "2 coffees." The words "2 coffees" went through Brenda like current. Whitmore blinked. Abbott? The name meant nothing to him. He had thrown a man into the street without ever asking what he was called. "General, I think there's some confusion. We don't have anyone—" "Older gentleman?" The general's eyes settled on the window table as he said it, on the cold eggs, on the 2 bills lying by the plate, on the cup sitting upside down on its saucer. "Black man, 60 next March. Left leg gone below the knee. Wears his old field jacket." A pause. "He'd have been here at 7. He is never late. I know exactly one thing in this world more reliable than him, and I command none of it." Nobody spoke. Somewhere in the kitchen, the griddle hissed. "You may know him by sight," the general continued, turning back to Whitmore. "Today is the 15th anniversary of the ambush in the Korengal Valley. 15 years ago this morning, Sergeant Abbott's convoy was hit and pinned down in a riverbed for 6 hours. He made 9 trips through open fire. He carried 11 men out of that valley on his back, one at a time, until a rocket took his leg on the 9th trip. Then he gave the medics his tourniquet, because Sergeant Tate needed it more." He let that sit in the room. "Last month, the Department of the Army finished its review. His Silver Star has been upgraded to the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest decoration this nation can give a soldier." The general's jaw tightened, the smallest crack in the granite. "I came to deliver the invitation to the ceremony myself, not because regulations require it, because Captain Dale Holloway was the 6th man he carried out of that riverbed." A breath. "My son." The diner did not gasp. It was past gasping. The pastor had his hand over his mouth. One of the Firehouse twins was crying without making any sound at all, which is how firefighters cry. Phones everywhere, forgotten, still recording. Whitmore had gone the color of the linoleum. His mouth opened and closed and produced nothing, because he was doing arithmetic now too, and every column of it ended in the man on the bus bench. It was Tessa who broke the silence. 19 years old, mop water still on her shoes, voice shaking and clear at the same time. She raised one hand and pointed past the general, through the window, across the street, to the soaked figure sitting at attention in the rain. "He's right there, sir." Her voice cracked in half. "He's sitting in the rain. That man threw him out." The general turned to the window. He found the bench. He found the old man on it, back straight, badge clenched in one fist, rain running off him like he was something the storm had given up trying to move. Then, very slowly, General Raymond Holloway turned back around and looked at Calvin Whitmore. Looked at the upside-down cup, at the cold eggs, at the wet floor and the mop, and the laminated sign on the door, still warm. 4 decades of battlefield calm, and every ounce of it was now aimed at one man in a charcoal suit. "Threw him out," the general repeated. Quiet, almost gentle. "General, there was a misunderstanding. A dress code issue. I never—" "Save it." 2 words, dropped like a hatch closing. "I've taken fire that lied to me less." The general put his cap back on, squared it, and walked past Whitmore the way you walk past furniture. He pushed open the door, the little bell chimed its stupid, cheerful chime, and the most powerful soldier in America stepped out into the rain. The general crossed the street through stopped traffic, aides flanking him, rain beating on 4 silver stars. Owen saw him coming. For a moment the old man simply stared, as if the weather had started producing hallucinations. Then training overrode disbelief, and he pushed himself up off the bench, prosthetic and all, into something like attention. "Sit easy, Sergeant," Holloway said.
"Respectfully, sir. No." Owen stood all the way up, soaked, steaming, one fist still closed around the badge. "Not for this." And then, in front of the diner, the street, and 40 phone cameras, the Chief of Staff of the United States Army came to attention first and saluted a man who had just been thrown out of a roadside diner like a bag of trash. He held the salute. Rain ran down both their faces. Owen raised his hand and returned it, slow and exact, and somewhere behind the diner glass, the pastor began to weep. "Sergeant Abbott, General Holloway." A pause. "You're a long way from the Pentagon, sir." 15 years today, the general said. "I wasn't going to send you a letter." An aide moved to put a poncho over Owen's shoulders. Owen accepted it the way he accepted everything that morning, with a small nod, more for the aide's sake than his own. "Dale wanted to come," Holloway said. "I told him to wait for the ceremony. I am beginning to regret a great many decisions about today." That was when Whitmore arrived, hurrying across the street under an umbrella his assistant held, his voice arriving before he did. "General, sir, please, this is all a terrible misunderstanding, a staffing failure. Brand standards were misapplied. If I had known who this gentleman was..." "That's the part that interests me." Holloway didn't raise his voice. He never had to. "What you do to people when you think nobody important is watching." Tessa came out of the diner with no coat and her phone held out in both hands, like an offering. "Sir, you should see it. All of it." The colonel took the phone. The general watched in silence. 8 minutes, condensed into the 30 seconds Tessa had cued. Coffee poured across a lap. A brass crest kicked through a puddle. An old man dragged with his foot, pointing the wrong way. The general's face did not change, which was somehow worse than if it had. He handed the phone back. "Thank you, young lady. Hold on to that." Then he turned to Whitmore, and when he spoke, each word arrived separately, like rounds being chambered. "You poured scalding coffee on a disabled veteran. You kicked the crest of the 3rd Regiment into the gutter. Then your men dragged him out by a leg. The United States Army still owes him." He let the rain fill the pause. "Mr. Whitmore, your company has a $30 million food services bid sitting on desks at 3 Army installations right now. I was not planning to read it personally." A beat. Plans change. Whitmore's umbrella tilted. "General, please, we can discuss this. Lunch, my office, anywhere. I'll comp the entire town. I'll fund a veterans program. I'll..." "Sir!" It was Owen who interrupted, quiet as ever. Both men turned. "Don't ruin a man on my account, General. That's not why anybody got carried out of that riverbed." He looked at Whitmore then, and there was no hate in it, which was the heaviest part. "I never wanted his company. I wanted the window table. My friend liked the sunrise." Nobody said anything for a moment. The rain eased, as if it too were listening. The general studied Owen a long second, then nodded once. "Noted, Sergeant." He turned to his aide. "Get him inside and dry, and tell whoever runs that griddle will need 2 coffees at the window table." A pause. Both black. The bell over the diner door chimed. Owen Abbott walked back in, escorted by a colonel, and every single person in the copper skillet stood up. The pastor, the twins, the trucker, Brenda, crying openly now,
the little girl lifted up by her mother so she could see him over the booths, waving like he was a parade.
Calvin Whitmore stood alone on the sidewalk in the rain, holding a wet umbrella, watching his own employees give a standing ovation to the man he had thrown away. His phone began to buzz in his pocket. It would not stop buzzing for 6 days. By sundown, Tessa's clip had 1 million views. By midnight, 8 million. The internet gave it the only title it needed. They threw out a war hero, and a 4-star general came to get him. People watched the coffee hit Owen's lap and felt their own faces go hot. People watched the badge skip through the puddle and heard themselves make sounds at their phones. And then, people watched a general salute, first in the rain, and grown men in 17 time zones discovered something in their eye. By Thursday morning, the clip was 40 million views and rising, and it was no longer a video. It was a verdict, waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Sandra Ellison made the paperwork her job. She was a reporter at the Falls Creek Courier, a paper most people use to wrap fish. And this was the story she had been sharpening her whole career for. While the networks chased the general, Sandra chased the records. She found them. A server in Charlotte, fired after Whitmore complained that her hijab was off-brand. A line cook in Memphis, written up for playing gospel in the kitchen. 3 separate settlements, sealed, paid quietly to make discrimination complaints disappear. A pattern, 10 years long, of one man deciding who deserved to be visible. Sandra published Friday morning under a headline with no adjectives. He has done this before. The Army moved faster than the press. Thursday afternoon, a procurement office at Fort Gregg released a statement that read like dry ice. After a review of vendor conduct standards, Whitmore Hospitality Group has been removed from consideration for current and future food services contracts. $30 million. Gone in a sentence. The 2 other installations followed before dinner. Nobody at the Pentagon commented. Nobody at the Pentagon needed to. The stock opened Friday down 19%. By the closing bell, the franchise partners were calling. A children's hospital quietly canceled a gala booking. The board of directors, men and women who had tolerated Calvin Whitmore the way you tolerate a smoke alarm with a low battery, scheduled an emergency session for Monday morning. Whitmore spent the weekend doing the only thing he knew how to do, managing the brand. He hired a crisis firm. He recorded an apology video, gray sweater, soft lighting, a bookshelf he had never read. He said the words, "deeply sorry," and "not who we are," and "journey of growth." The internet noticed he never said Owen Abbott's name. The video became its own scandal by Sunday. Monday, 9 in the morning, 14th floor. The board meeting lasted 50 minutes. There was shouting, but not much, because the numbers did the shouting. A motion was read, a vote was taken, and the company, founded on Calvin Whitmore's name, removed Calvin Whitmore from it, effective immediately, 11-0. Then the general counsel slid a folder across the table, and it got worse. The morals clause. Conduct bringing public disgrace upon the company. The severance package. The golden parachute Whitmore had spent 2 decades padding evaporated in a paragraph. He left the building he used to own carrying a cardboard box, while the security guards he used to employ held the door and did not look at him. There is a particular silence powerful men hear when the power is gone. He would be hearing it for years. The new board did one more thing before lunch. Looking for any rag to wipe the stain, they approved the sale of one underperforming asset. The copper skillet, Falls Creek, Virginia, sold back to one Gus Pemberton for the price of $1, with a renovation fund attached and a press release nobody believed and everybody welcomed. Gus signed with the same hand that had shaken in October, except now it was steady. Eleanor came home from her third surgery that same week, stronger. The copper pans stayed on the wall. The new sign came down. Some things, it turns out, can be unsold. 3 weeks later, in a hall at Fort Myer with flags older than the state of Virginia, the ceremony took place. Owen Abbott stood at attention in a suit Brenda and Tessa had helped him pick out, the regimental crest polished and pinned where it belonged. The citation was read aloud, every word of it. 6 hours and 9 trips and 800 meters of riverbed at a time. The general's hands fastened the Distinguished Service Cross below medals Owen had kept for 30 years in a drawer, next to his socks. And then Captain Dale Holloway walked to the podium. He was 40 now, with his father's jaw and a scar his dress uniform almost hid. He had written a speech. He folded it and put it away. "I weighed 210 pounds with my gear," he said. Sergeant Abbott had already made 5 trips. He was bleeding from places I could see and places I couldn't. And he picked me up out of that water like I was a kid who'd fallen asleep on the couch. He stopped, started again. 800 meters. I counted his steps against the gunfire because counting was the only thing keeping me conscious. I got to 412 before I went under. He never put me down. The hall was silent, the way the diner had been silent, except this silence was the opposite kind. "For 15 years, I have eaten breakfast on Wednesdays," Dale said, "wherever I'm posted. Because I knew somewhere in Virginia he was doing the same, with a cup of coffee for the man who didn't make it. People ask what the medal means. I can't tell you what it means to the Army." He looked at Owen then, and his voice finally broke rank. "But to 6 kids who have a grandfather, 11 women who kept their husbands, and 1 captain who got to grow old, it means breakfast. It means every breakfast since." The applause stood up before the people did. In the back row, in a dress she had bought with her first paycheck from the reopened copper skillet, Tessa Reed filmed one more video. It got more views than the first one. The internet, which had spent a week learning Calvin Whitmore's name, finally learned Owen Abbott's. Veterans groups shared it. Schools played it. And in a comment section a million strangers deep, the top reply simply said what everyone was thinking. The general didn't come to honor the man. The general came to thank him. There's a difference, and now the whole world knows it. The next Wednesday, it took Owen Abbott 20 minutes to get from the diner door to his table, not because of the leg, because of the line. Veterans had driven in from 5 states, Korea vets in ball caps stiff with pins, a Vietnam medic who didn't talk about it, kids barely out of brag with their spouses and their babies. They filled every booth and stood along the counter, and every one of them wanted to shake the hand that had carried 11 men through a riverbed. The griddle never stopped hissing. Gus burned the first pancake on purpose, for luck, and the smell of bacon and maple rolled out the open door and down Main Street like a flag unrolling. The window table waited for him. It would always wait for him now. Screwed into the wood at its edge was a small brass plaque, polished to a shine Brenda checked daily. Reserved for SFC Owen Abbott, and for those who never came home. Below it, smaller, 1 customer, 2 cups. Always. Tessa brought the coffees before he asked. Both black. She set the second cup across the table, square on its saucer, right side up, the way it would sit every Wednesday for as long as the diner stood.
Her tuition was paid through graduation. Gus had insisted, and the veterans groups had insisted harder, and somewhere in the stack of scholarship paperwork was a handwritten note from a general.
Brenda ran the floor like she owned a piece of it, because now she did. Gus had made her a partner with the renovation money. The laminated sign was gone from the door. In its place hung a photograph. An old man and a general, saluting each other in the rain. The pastor came every Wednesday now, too, and he sat closer. He had stood up too late once. He did not plan on being late again. And the little girl from that morning came in with her mother, holding a crayon drawing of a man with a silver leg standing in the rain. Owen taped it to the window himself, right at sunrise level. As for Calvin Whitmore, the world did not destroy him, because it didn't need to. He got a consulting job at a firm 2 states away, at a fraction of the money, in an office with no window. Sometimes a coworker squints at him like they're trying to place a face from somewhere. He tells them they're mistaken. Every diner he passes, he crosses the street. Some sentences don't need prisons. Owen ate his eggs while the room buzzed around him. He signed a kid's cap. He told the Vietnam medic a joke that made him laugh for the first time in front of strangers. And when the sun finally broke through the clouds and came through the window, gold and ordinary and on time, he turned his face to it and closed his eyes, and his lips moved, just barely. Happy Wednesday, Mason. The second cup steamed in the sunlight. Outside, Falls Creek went about its morning, and the table by the window, fought over by no one and belonging to everyone, held its 2 cups of coffee like a small church holds a candle. He never missed a Wednesday again. Neither did the town.
Okay, real talk for a second. I told you this story because somewhere today, someone got judged in 5 seconds by somebody who knew nothing about them. The vet at the bus stop, the lady mopping floors. You don't know who you're talking to. Honestly, you don't need to. Just be decent. That's it. That's the whole hack.
So here's my question for you. Have you ever watched someone get humiliated and stayed silent, like everyone in that diner? Or have you been the one who stood up? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And the stories you all share are honestly better than anything I could write. And if this story hits you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs the reminder. The veteran in your family, the friend who eats alone, the person who thinks nobody sees them, because somebody does. Subscribe if you want more stories where respect costs nothing and karma keeps the receipts. Until next Wednesday, save a seat for somebody. You never know who walks in next.